My name is Evelyn Mercer, and I am 62 years old. For most of my life, I have been a quiet, steady woman who believed in building things slowly, carefully, and with a sense of fairness. I have worked as a financial compliance consultant for more than 3 decades, the type of job most people never think about until something goes wrong. But I never minded. I enjoyed the methodical rhythm of documentation, the rules, the quiet logic of it all. At 62, I live alone in a modest but warm home in Portland. My days are simple. I drink tea instead of coffee. I walk in the evenings instead of the mornings. And I try, in every interaction, to leave people better than I found them. At least, that's what I had always believed was expected of me. 3 years ago, I began dating a man named Michael Ashton, a polite, soft-spoken engineer in his late 50s. We met in an evening woodworking class and bonded over our love of creating practical things, bookshelves, small tables, anything that made sense and served a purpose. For a while, I thought he and I were building something sturdy together. What complicated things was his family, particularly his parents, Leonard and Ruth Ashton, owners of a small, aging manufacturing business they proudly described as a legacy company. They often reminded anyone who would listen that it had been in the family since the 1950s, though they rarely mentioned the long years of mismanagement that had reduced its reputation to a shadow of what it used to be. From the beginning, there was a strange tension whenever I met them. They spoke to me with thinly veiled condescension, asking whether I ever regretted having no real career in the creative world. They didn't understand what I did. They didn't want to understand. In their minds, compliance sounded like paperwork and passivity. A safe little job for a safe little woman. Their words, not mine. Still, I tried to let it slide. They were Michael's parents. I wanted peace. I wanted a future that wasn't weighed down by petty remarks. I tried to be gracious. But beneath their jabs, beneath their smug smiles and casual dismissal of my profession, something else simmered, something I didn't fully recognize at the time. Because while they mocked my career, their failing business was quietly leaning on something of mine. Something they had no right to rely on. Something worth $90,000. And they had absolutely no idea that I knew. Not yet. But I was about to discover everything. And nothing in my calm, orderly life would ever look the same again. The moment everything shattered began on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Michael had invited me to join him at his parents' home for dinner. I hesitated, as I often did, but he reassured me that things would be different. "They're warming up to you," he said. I wanted to believe him. I arrived with a small bouquet of daisies, Ruth's favorite flower, though she had never thanked me for them. I placed them in her hands. She sniffed, nodded, and turned away, as though performing a chore. Dinner was a dry roast chicken, overcooked potatoes, and the usual assortment of judgments. They asked about my hobby job again. They made remarks about how they always expected Michael to marry someone more accomplished. They laughed as though it were light, harmless humor. Michael smiled uncomfortably, but said nothing. But the real blow came near the end of the evening. Leonard stood, clapped Michael on the shoulder, and said, "Son, the bank finally approved that additional operating credit. We're saved. For now." My fork paused halfway to my mouth. "What credit?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Oh," Ruth said, waving her hand, "just some financial nonsense." "Hard to believe you work in finance, dear, given how little you seem to understand these things." Leonard chuckled. "Anyway, it's a good thing we had that guarantor. I still don't know why anyone would willingly co-sign for a company as old as ours. Must have been a desperate soul." My stomach tightened. A guarantor? A co-signer? I looked at Michael. He avoided my eyes. Later that night, when we were finally alone in his car, I asked him one question, quietly, evenly. "Michael, what did your father mean about the guarantor?" He exhaled. His shoulders slumped. "Evelyn, please don't be upset. I was going to tell you. I I needed time. Tell me what? I asked. He swallowed hard. My parents' business, it was in trouble. They needed a line of credit extended. And they needed a guarantor with a stronger financial record. You have perfect credit. Incredible credit. So I used your profile to help them secure the line. You used my profile? I repeated softly. Michael, what does that even? I signed you on as the secondary guarantor. But it's just temporary. They'll pay it back. They just needed to get through the year. It's not a big deal. Michael, I whispered, how much? He finally looked me in the eyes. 90,000. The air left my lungs. He kept talking, apologizing, explaining, insisting it was for family, that it was temporary, that his parents didn't even know. But I barely heard him. All I could think was, they mocked me. They belittled me. And their entire business, their precious legacy, was standing on my credit, taken without my consent. And Michael, the man I trusted, had signed my name without telling me. A betrayal wrapped in silence. A silence that ended that night. But the true storm had only just begun. In the days that followed, I found myself drifting backwards, reflecting on childhood lessons, marriage memories, and all the years that taught me how to recognize a lie wrapped in charm. I was raised by a mother who believed that a woman should always have her own anchor, something no one could take from her. Her advice was simple: people can love you and still betray you. Keep your accounts in order and your eyes open. I had lived by those words for decades. They guided me through a painful divorce in my 40s, when I discovered my former husband had been secretly draining our savings. The loss took years to repair, but I rebuilt my credit slowly and intentionally. I had sworn never again to allow someone to use my name, my reputation, or my financial stability for their gain. And yet, here I was. At 62. Used again. The more I thought about it, the more I saw how deliberate Michael's behavior had been. He had never asked about my finances, not directly. But he had spent months praising my responsibility. He'd asked casual questions about credit scores, about my consulting work, about how I structured accounts. I assumed he admired my habits. But now I saw the pattern. And his parents. Oh, his parents. Their contempt for my career had always felt strangely intense for something so irrelevant to their lives. But now, I realized they had dismissed me because they assumed I had nothing of value, nothing they needed. Ironically, my most valuable asset, my financial integrity, was something they were already benefiting from. Without my credit, their entire company would have collapsed. And yet they laughed at me, belittled me, treated me like an aging woman with no power. I thought about every snide remark. Compliance isn't a real job. Safe little career for a safe little woman. Your work must be boring. They thought I wasn't worth taking seriously. They had no idea that they were surviving on the backbone of my professional discipline. They had no idea who they were actually dealing with. What they assumed was passivity was simply restraint. And restraint can be lifted. I did not raise my voice. I did not scream. I did not threaten. I simply began preparing. Because I knew how lines of credit worked. I knew how guarantors were documented. I knew what banks required, and what they feared. I knew how to retrieve records, how to freeze accounts, how to initiate investigations. And I knew how to do it all quietly. Michael might have betrayed me. His parents might have mocked me. But I had something none of them expected. Knowledge. Patience. And truth. And truth, in the right hands, is a form of revenge no one sees coming. I didn't confront anyone immediately. That wasn't my way. I wanted information before emotion. So the morning after that disastrous dinner, I brewed a cup of chamomile tea and sat down at my dining table with my laptop and a yellow legal pad. I opened my bank portal, then my credit report, then my archived emails. I began digging. 40 years of financial work teaches you to see patterns in numbers the way some people see faces in clouds. And what I found made my pulse tighten. The line of credit had been activated 8 months earlier. Payments had been sporadic, inconsistent, and in 2 cases, late. The business had drawn nearly the maximum amount. And most alarming of all, the guarantor signature page had been uploaded digitally, with an electronic signature that looked like mine but was not mine. Forgery. Document fraud. A federal offense. I felt no rage. Only clarity. I pulled the file and examined metadata. My heart didn't race. My breathing remained steady. I simply reviewed it the way I'd reviewed hundreds of falsified corporate documents in my career. After confirming what I already suspected, I printed everything. Then I began drafting a timeline. A clean, detailed chronology of events. At noon, I called the bank. I introduced myself politely, referenced the account number, and requested the full guarantor documentation packet. The woman on the phone hesitated. I could hear her posture shift when she realized the secondary guarantor herself was requesting documents. Within minutes, she connected me to a manager. By late afternoon, I had everything. Everything. And it was worse than I imagined. Not only had Michael forged my digital signature, but Leonard had submitted additional documents verifying my awareness and consent. His signature was real. His claims were false. A coordinated effort. Deliberate. Not accidental. Not impulsive. Not a misunderstanding. This wasn't a man helping his struggling parents. This was a family scheme, one built on entitlement, arrogance, and the assumption that a quiet woman in her 60s was too naive to notice. That evening, I sat in my living room with a binder of evidence in my lap. I turned each page slowly, listening to the crisp sound of truth unfolding. Most people fear confrontation. I do not. Not when I have facts. Not when I have documentation. But I wasn't ready to confront them yet. No. First, I needed one final piece of information, proof of intent. Something that would eliminate any possibility of miscommunication or excuse. And I knew exactly where to find it. Michael's home office. He kept everything on his desktop computer, emails, drafts, messages. He was organized, but not cautious. So that weekend, when he invited me over to talk, I agreed. I brought him a pie I baked that morning. I smiled. I calmed his nerves. I acted as though I might forgive him. He relaxed. He showered. He left his office door open. And while he was in the bathroom, I sat down at his desk, woke the screen, and inserted a small flash drive, a drive with an autocopy extraction script I'd used many years ago during internal investigations. In less than 2 minutes, every relevant email, draft, message, and financial file was mirrored into my possession. I walked out of his house that evening with a polite goodbye, and a complete copy of his digital involvement. The puzzle was complete. And now, it was time to bring the truth to light. On Sunday morning, I sat once again at my dining table with my binder, my flash drive contents, and a patient determination I had perfected over decades of quiet resilience. Piece by piece, I reviewed the extracted files. And what I found confirmed everything. There were emails between Michael and his father discussing the line of credit. Emails where Michael reassured Leonard that Evelyn won't notice anything. Emails where Leonard wrote, she should be grateful to help the family. Women her age should feel useful. Emails where Ruth chimed in, saying my career wasn't real anyway, so I wouldn't understand the financial details even if I did find out. I paused at that one. The dismissal. The arrogance. The casual cruelty. They had underestimated me every step of the way. They had weaponized my kindness, my patience, my quiet demeanor. But the most damning email was one from Michael to himself, a draft he never sent. He planned to break up with me once the business stabilized. Not immediately. Not dramatically. Just, quietly, gently, as though I were an obligation he needed to release. I read the words twice, then closed my eyes. 3 years together. 3 years of companionship. 3 years of vulnerability and trust. All while he was planning an exit strategy the moment my usefulness ended. There are moments in life where anger burns hot, loud and messy. And then there are moments where anger becomes something else. Something calm. Something cold. Something resolute. This was the latter. I printed every email. Every message. Every attachment. Every timestamp. By noon, I had arranged the documents into a clean investigative report. By 2, I emailed a copy to myself and printed a second binder. By 6, everything was packaged in a labeled, chronologically ordered, professionally formatted file, complete with my own compliance summary. And then I did something simple. I called the bank again. I introduced myself to the fraud department. I submitted the report. I answered their questions. I sent them the evidence binder digitally and requested a formal review. The woman on the phone said, "Ms. Mercer, this is extremely serious." I replied, "I know." She said, "We will begin an internal investigation immediately." I said, "Thank you. Please proceed." When I hung up, there was no satisfaction yet. Only quiet certainty. Because I wasn't done. Not until I faced them. Not until I gave them the gift of truth, delivered calmly, factually, without a single raised voice. The confrontation was coming. And I was ready. I chose Tuesday evening for the confrontation. I knew they'd all be home, Michael, Leonard, and Ruth. I texted Michael ahead of time. "We need to talk. I'll come by at 6. No emotion. No hint of what was coming. When I arrived, Leonard opened the door, surprised to see the binder in my hand. "Evening, Evelyn," he said with forced politeness. "You look serious." "I am," I replied. We gathered in their living room. The same room where they first mocked my career. The same room where they dismissed me as irrelevant. Funny how quickly things change. Michael sat on the edge of the sofa. His parents hovered nearby. I placed the binder on the coffee table. "Before I begin," I said gently, "I want you all to listen without interruption. What I'm about to share affects all of you." They exchanged glances. Then I opened the binder. "This," I said, sliding the first page forward, "is the line of credit agreement your company has been using for the past 8 months. It is backed by my financial reputation and guaranteed under my name." Ruth frowned. We thought Michael." I raised a hand. She stopped speaking. "This," I continued, turning the page, "is the electronic signature you submitted on my behalf. It is not mine. It was forged." Leonard's face paled. "This," I said, placing printed emails on the table, "is your communication discussing how I wouldn't notice, how I should feel useful, and how my career isn't real enough to understand what you were doing." Ruth's mouth opened slightly. She looked at her son. "Michael, what is this?" He buried his face in his hands. "And finally," I said, sliding the last section forward, "these are internal emails revealing the plan to end your relationship with me once the financial crisis stabilized." Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. Michael lifted his head. His eyes were red. "Evelyn. I never meant." "You did," I said softly. "You meant every part of it. You just didn't expect me to find out." He reached forward, but I stepped back. Leonard tried to speak, but his voice cracked. We were desperate." "I understand desperation," I replied calmly. "What I do not understand is entitlement. Or arrogance. Or the belief that exploiting someone while belittling them is acceptable." Ruth whispered, What are you going to do?" I straightened my shoulders. "I have already submitted a full report to your bank's fraud department. They have begun an internal investigation. The forged documents, the false claims of consent, the unauthorized use of my identity, these are federal violations. Michael stood. Evelyn, please. No, I said. I'm done being your resource. Your safety net. Your quiet, convenient woman. Leonard collapsed into the armchair. Ruth looked faint. Michael shook. We'll lose everything. I met his eyes. You already lost me. And with that, I closed the binder, placed it back in my purse, and walked out of their house without another word. Behind me, I heard panic. I heard anger. I heard regret. But I did not turn back. Not once. The consequences unfolded faster than even I expected. Within 2 weeks, the bank froze the Ashton Company's credit line. Investigators reached out to me multiple times, requesting clarification, which I provided with calm professionalism. By the end of the month, the bank declared the guarantor documentation fraudulent. The line of credit was terminated. The balance was due in full. The Ashtons did not have the funds. The bank filed official fraud charges. The State Business Bureau opened an inquiry. Their suppliers demanded advance payment. Their employees quit, sensing instability. The Ashton Manufacturing Company, their proud legacy, their self-declared achievement, their generational pride, collapsed. Michael lost his job. Leonard and Ruth lost their business. Their assets went under review. Their accounts were flagged. Their reputation, so fragile and inflated, shattered. They attempted to contact me repeatedly. Calls. Texts. Emails. Apologies. Excuses. Please. I did not respond. Because consequences are not cruelty. They are clarity. And clarity is something they had avoided for far too long. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, Michael showed up at my door. I opened it because I wanted closure, not conversation. His face was gaunt. His shoulders sagged. He looked like a man who had finally run out of charm and excuses. Evelyn, he murmured, I ruined everything. No, I corrected softly. You revealed everything. He swallowed. I cared about you. I believe you cared about what I could provide. That's not fair. It's accurate. He looked at me with devastation, real or performative. I didn't care anymore. Is there any way, any possible way, we can fix this? He asked. I shook my head slowly. I don't rebuild relationships on foundations made of lies. He exhaled, broken. I'm so sorry. I hope someday, I said calmly, you become a man who means those words. I closed the door gently. Not angrily. Not dramatically. Just firmly. The consequences were done. Now it was time for healing. Months passed, and life found its quiet rhythm again. My credit was restored, thanks to the fraud finding, the forged signature was legally nullified. My record remained pristine. My financial name, the one I had spent decades protecting, was intact. I returned to my woodworking class. I rejoined my evening walks. I enjoyed the peace of a home unburdened by deceit. Sometimes, people ask me whether I regret exposing the Ashtons. Whether I feel guilt about how much they lost. My answer is simple. Truth is not cruelty. Accountability is not revenge. And dignity is not negotiable. In the end, my boring compliance career, the one they mocked, was precisely what gave me the tools to protect myself. Ethics isn't glamorous, but it's powerful. Documentation isn't exciting, but it's undeniable. And sometimes, the quietest woman in the room is the one holding all the evidence. My revenge wasn't emotional. It wasn't dramatic. It was simply the truth, organized, documented, and respectfully delivered. Today, I share this story for a reason. Not to celebrate someone's downfall, but to remind anyone listening. Do not underestimate a calm woman. Do not dismiss someone because they don't shout. And never, ever assume silence means ignorance. I rebuilt my life in peace. They rebuilt theirs in the shadow of accountability. And I walked forward with clarity, strength, and a renewed sense of self-respect. If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever been used or belittled, if you've ever been the quiet presence in a room full of loud arrogance, I hope my story reminds you that your power doesn't disappear just because someone else refuses to see it. Thank you for listening. And tell me, what would you have done in my place?